And film is a collective art. It's an eclectic art, it's a collective art. And it's, by its own nature, become the most communicative art that we have in the world. And the only two great ambassadors we've ever had from the United States have been jazz and film. And that doesn't come from sitting off in a corner.
I would love to have a mass audience. You're looking at a man who's been searching for a mass audience. And if I had had one, I'd be obliged. That's all I can say.
Though the kids earn fame, no fortune, they will make it through the years. And these 6 walls...
They pursued similar career paths, but Nicholas Ray and Orson Welles never associated and had almost nothing in common in terms of interests, personality, or work methods. Still, their lives paralleled in remarkable ways, through acclaim as movie directors, to years as expatriates, to late phases as experimental filmmakers, hoping to rehabilitate their damaged reputations. They were born 4 years apart in Wisconsin, Ray in Galesville and Welles in Kenosha. In their mid-teens, both boys tragically lost their fathers to alcoholism, a traumatic experience that impacted their future careers. They each developed a love for the stage and radio and got involved in the Federal Theater Project in the 1930s, where they met John Houseman, who would mentor both fatherless young men at different times. Their first films as directors, Welles' Citizen Kane and Ray's They Live by Night, often cited as the two greatest directorial debuts of the 1940s, were both produced by RKO Pictures under Houseman's guidance.
I would. I worked there.
You worked in Macayo.
Here's your $1.
Welles directed his second wife, Rita Hayworth, in the film noir The Lady from Shanghai, and Ray directed his second wife, Gloria Graham, in the film noir In a Lonely Place.
By any chance be Mr. Baker, the real estate Mr. Baker?
Could be.
Both marriages ended soon thereafter, as neither man was known for being faithful. Ray and Welles were targeted for FBI surveillance personally by J. Edgar Hoover due to their left-wing politics. Rather than risk further harassment by the Congress's Un-American Activities Committee, Welles left the country. Ray was allowed to testify privately at the request of RKO chief Howard Hughes, the eccentric industrialist whom Welles had considered basing Citizen Kane upon before settling on William Randolph Hearst. Despite making a string of masterworks in the 40s and 50s, Welles and Ray never acclimated to the Hollywood system. They could be charming, but also self-sabotaging in their business dealings, and were ultimately blackballed for personal as much as political reasons. They both directed their final American-made studio films in 1958. For the following decade, through most of the 60s, they lived in Europe, where they struggled to find backing for various projects. Welles had once aspired to make a film of the life of Christ, but it was Ray who was hired to direct the biblical epic King of Kings, to be shot in Spain. Welles was initially cast as Herod the Great, but ultimately only narrated the film. Welles recorded his lines long after Ray's work was done, and the two never met or collaborated.
And it is written that in the year 63 BC, the Roman legions, like a scourge of locusts, poured through the east, laying waste the land of Canaan and the kingdom of Judea.
Both directors returned to the United States at the end of the 60s, attracted by social changes and the new freedoms in the film industry, hoping for a fresh start. New Hollywood had no interest in Wells or Ray, though, and they could only function thanks to the efforts of a few acolytes and admirers. Wells supported himself with acting and narrating jobs, and Ray did so with speaking gigs and by selling off paintings from his art collection.
As a director, for instance, I pay myself out of my acting jobs. I use my own work to subsidize my work. In other words, I'm crazy.
Actor and director Dennis Hopper, who had been discovered by Ray and cast in Rebel Without a Cause, helped Ray get a teaching position at Harper College, where he recruited his students to help make an experimental film called We Can't Go Home Again, in which Ray plays a version of himself, an out-of-favor director trying to make a relevant art film. Prior to this, Hopper had even let Ray move in with him, until Ray quickly outstayed his welcome. Critic and director Peter Bogdanovich helped promote Wells' new experimental film, The Other Side of the Wind, which he also acted in. Dennis Hopper has a brief part in it, too. As shooting dragged on and Wells ran out of money, Bogdanovich allowed him to move into his home and even shoot some of the film there, until Wells outstayed his welcome. The Other Side of the Wind concerns a macho movie director's obsession with a mercurial young actor, a dynamic that seems at least partially inspired by Nicholas Ray's intense relationship with James Dean. It's unlikely that Wells and Ray could have been aware of each other's projects, and yet both of these films are meditations on cinema that focus on cantankerous veteran directors who ultimately die by suicide at the end of their stories. During breaks in filming, Wells made the abstract documentary F for Fake and screened it at the San Sebastian Film Festival in 1973, the same year that Ray presented the first cut of We Can't Go Home Again at the Cannes Film Festival. Critics despised both films, calling them indulgent and confusing, making it even harder for the directors to keep working. These two films would be the last theatrical features released by Wells and Ray in their lifetimes.
Right. I'm dead and doing very well. Andrew Pogosh Durward. I am alive.
Filmmaker Wim Wenders cast Ray in a small part in The American Friend alongside Dennis Hopper. This led to Wenders and Ray collaborating on a docudrama, Lightning Over Water, about Ray's efforts to make one last film. Ray knew that he was terminally ill with cancer, and he passed away in 1979 before the film was completed. Wenders finished and premiered it the following year.
Yeah? Did I hurt you when I hit you with my stick?
Ray's wife, Susan, oversaw the restoration and re-release of We Can't Go Home Again in 2011. Wells died in 1985, and his film, The Other Side of the Wind, was posthumously completed and released in 2018.
And the only way that people, who've got to be well endowed with ego, as anybody in any form of show business has to be, we wouldn't stand up in front of the public and ask them to be quiet. But, and listen, anybody who has that kind of presumption out of protection, self-protection, it seems to me, has to fight it and think of the work instead of yourself, and not the work as a reflection of yourself.
I like the promise. I like the promise. I like the hope. I enjoy doing what I'm doing very much, and I enjoy preparing for the next thing. I enjoy acting. I enjoy everything in the theater. The celluloid strip is a bloodstream for me, you know. That insanity is over, you know. And it was insanity. I work much better now. I like myself better now.
With their titles that evoke the turbulence of nature, Lightning Over Water and The Other Side of the Wind are semi-autobiographical works about elderly directors, both played by real directors, trying to complete a testament film and sadly failing. Both films are about death and about the death of cinema, and were released after the deaths of their respective creators. And in one final strange and profound coincidence, the very last word uttered by the protagonist in each film is exactly the same.
Cut.
Cut!